Morning, brothers and sisters. You'll be opening your Bibles to Genesis chapter 22. Genesis chapter 22. We are going to have our part 2 lesson of this chapter regarding Abraham's only son, his only unique son, Isaac. Genesis chapter 22. Before we get started, just kind of want to mention a couple of announcements that we have here. Is that first I want to express my gratitude and thanks for all the ladies and all the help that showed up this past Thursday in regards to designing our float. We already got the sign, the Church of Christ sign, ready and good to go and so forth. We're going to be meeting, I believe, did we decide every Thursday, 2 o'clock? Up to the point of the parade? Okay, every Thursday, 2 o'clock. So we'll be meeting again here in the back room this coming Thursday at 2 o'clock, and we're going to continue working and designing our float for the parade. Also, I got a phone call this morning from Brother Richard. He is sick with the stomach flu. So, yes, he has not been feeling well for the last several days, and so be keeping him in your prayers. And
Him?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Brother Richard. Yes, Brother Richard. Yeah, he is sick with the stomach flu, and so keeping him in your prayers. Also, Sister Sherry, you were gone for the last, I believe, week or so, taking care of your cousin's husband, and
Naaman Green.
Yeah, Naaman Green.
They had his services yesterday.
Had service yesterday, and so let's be keeping that family in our prayers. We express our condolences and our love to the Green family. I know it's very tough, even especially during this time when you can't have visitations or anything like that. You can only have, funeral services over at the gravesite services. And I know it's difficult because of this whole pandemic that's going on. So I know it makes it very hard for the family. So we'll be keeping them in our prayers as well for their loss. Are there any other announcements or prayer requests that need to be made?
My daughter is sick in her stomach. She's having stomach problems.
Stomach problems. Man, it's been going around again. So.
That's Lene.
Yeah, Lene. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Any others? Well, if any requests come up during the week, you can always feel free to contact me over the phone or through Messenger on Facebook and let me know, and I'll make sure to get it updated on the church Facebook page and make sure that I send it to Sister Gwen, who takes care of our bulletin. Okay, well, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 22, and we're going to pick up where we left off last week, which really is sort of just the lessons that we have learned from Genesis chapter 22. Last week, kind of give a little bit of a review for those who missed out on Genesis 22, part 1. We noticed the similarities of Isaac and Jesus. Some have called it the type and antitype. You can refer to it as that. I kind of just prefer to keep things simple at times, seeing that the similarities that we see of Isaac is very similar to Jesus, who is our sacrifice under the New Testament, our one and only perfect sacrifice under the New Testament. And to kind of give a little bit of a review of those details and the similarities, verse 3, it mentions that God said to Abraham, "Take your only son." That word "only" in Hebrew is also expressed as unique son. The phrase is very similar to the Greek in John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Some of your versions may say, "Take your only begotten son Isaac." Some versions express it like that. Well, that word "only" or "begotten" can mean unique. Unique. What was so unique about Isaac?
He was the son of promise.
He was the son of promise. What's so unique about Jesus the Christ?
He was promised through the Old Testament.
He was promised through the Old Testament. He was the fulfillment the fulfillment of the promise that God made to Abraham of all nations shall be blessed. And other unique ways of Jesus being the sacrifice is the fact that he was the perfect sacrifice. He kept the law perfectly. Many ways that we can look at and that we can discuss of how Jesus was so unique. We see that also in verse 2 of Genesis 22, that he says, "Take your son, your unique son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah." Now during this time, several chapters ago, when Abraham gave his tithes to Melchizedek, or Melchizedek, as some like to refer to it as, he was the king of Salem. Well, Salem at that time was the city of Jerusalem. But here, the land of Moriah at this point in time was separated from the district of Salem. But by the time of the New Testament in Jerusalem, the land of Moriah was actually part of Jerusalem. Where was Jesus sacrificed? Jerusalem. Also in verse 4, we see that on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. When was Jesus raised from the grave? On the third day. So 3 days ago, when God told Abraham, "Take your unique son Isaac, whom you love, and sacrifice or offer him to me," at that point in time, the Hebrew writer in chapter 11 of the book of Hebrews in the New Testament clarified the fact that basically when Abraham received that instruction, that command, his son Isaac was already dead. But Abraham fulfilling that commandment, his faith being worked, or showing the working of his faith by obeying God's command, was his trust in that God had the power to what? To raise him from the dead, which, figuratively speaking, God did. On that third day, Abraham knew that his son was already dead because he had to fulfill that command. But the reason why he fulfilled the command is because he trusted in God, because he knows God has the power to raise his son from the dead, which figuratively speaking, he did. Verse 6 of Genesis 22, "And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac, his son." So we see that sometimes, when we look at those little cartoon pictures or those cartoon strips of this incident of Genesis 22, it kind of depicts Isaac most of the time as like a 12-year-old boy or sometimes even a little baby. But look what the text says. He took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. So Isaac was carrying the wood of the burnt offering. So at this point in time, he wasn't a 12-year-old boy. He wasn't a baby. He was a grown man. Perhaps 18. Some have indicated that he was 30 around this time. Right around the age of 30. But all we know is that he was a grown man able to carry the wood. In the New Testament, what did Jesus have to carry? His cross. He carried his cross.
Josephus says he was 25.
What's that? Josephus?
He says he was 25.
He says that he was 25. And so 18, 25, 30, I think the point that we can conclude is the fact that he was a grown man. And so he carried his wood, or Abraham laid it, the wood of the burnt offering, on his son to carry up to the mountain. And makes it even interesting is that when they left to do this, what did Abraham say to his servants that were with him?
We will come back.
We will come back. We then took our discussion last week to the point of how strong Abraham's example is regarding faith and trust and fulfilling a command that was, I refer to it as the father's worst nightmare. Any father's worst nightmare. Of having to kill your son. Just imagine, place yourself in Abraham's shoes. Even if this was vice versa. If God told you as a mother to sacrifice your son whom you love, what would you do? Most likely, I believe that it would be the reaction. Take us instead. We look at Abraham, and I've always wondered, this is when I wish that I could just be the fly on that wall. What was going on through his mind? Sure, I know the Hebrew writer through inspiration. He told us, saying that his faith was motivated, and he trusted in God to know that he had the power to raise his son. But still, with Abraham being a human being, don't you think there were some questions maybe going on in his head? I've always just wondered that. And that is a question that I'm going to ask Abraham when we get to heaven. People may say, oh, at that time it doesn't matter. Well, to me, it still matters. I want to know. What was going on through your head when God told you that?
Well, in verse 8, it showed that he was wondering because he asked, where's your lamb?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, Isaac was wanting to know. And then someone, I believe, what was it, Sister Jean, did you point that out about Isaac's faith? Or was it Sister Linda's? Okay. Somebody made a great point. Somebody made a great point last week regarding about the faith and trust of Isaac. Because the text doesn't say that he was resisting. He laid on that altar. He saw the knife in his father's hand.
He was down with it. No, not really. Not really ready.
Yeah. Verse 9, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Yeah, so he was bound. But it doesn't say that he was resisting. What's that?
He had that little faith too.
Mm-hmm.
He had to have known what was coming once his father bound him to that altar.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, once, I'm sorry, but my dad, he may be watching from home right now, but I mean, if my dad started to bind me, at least started to, I'd be fighting, getting away and be like, what's wrong with you? But yet, Isaac didn't. Isaac didn't.
But Isaac grew up with Abraham. Abraham taught him everything that he needed to know.
Absolutely, he did. His father taught his son everything that he needed to know. Now, we'll see that when we come to Isaac's, his event in life, his journey through faith and trust in God. When we get to his section of his life, of his journey, we'll see that he's not perfect, but still he had a godly father figure, such as Abraham, who raised him and who taught him. And so it seems that Abraham's influence did have a good, significant impact in the life of Isaac, seeing that he did not resist at all. His father said, the Lord's going to provide. Okay? He's going to provide. And he trusted in him. But in the end, did the Lord provide? Absolutely.
Yeah, he tied him forever.
Through the angel of the Lord, he came and he intervened and said, don't do it. Now God knows how strong your faith and how strong your trust is in him. And sure enough, did he provide an animal sacrifice for them?
Yes.
Absolutely. In verse 14, so Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide, as it is to this day. On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Great discussion that we had last week. And so now for the remainder of this class period that we have, I'd like for us to kind of discuss other things that we discovered from the text. I encourage everybody to go ahead and keep reading Genesis 22 at least once a day, in case if you discover something new from the text. I always discover new things from the text every single time that I keep rereading the chapter. As my mentor says, when it comes to digging into God's Word, it's like taking a teaspoon and trying to empty the ocean. In other words, you discover things all the time. You discover things all the time.
And you probably never learned it all.
What's that?
You probably never learned it all.
Oh, probably never learn it all. I mean, can't learn all of it because it's so much. It's like taking a teaspoon and emptying the ocean. but we can learn as much as we can during our time here. And so hopefully each and every one of us did read chapter 22 at least once a night, once a day. And in doing so, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to you. If you would like to share any other lessons that you found from Genesis 22, please feel free to speak. Now or forever hold your peace.
Well, for years, there's been false doctrine that all life is worship.
Mm.
Look at verse 5.
Yep.
What did he say? We will go over yonder and worship.
Yep.
Now, that means he wasn't worshiping at the time. So all life can't be worship.
Mm.
Because that's the first time that word was used in the Bible, right?
I bet you.
That's a good point. I understand what Brother Sid is saying. There is a sort of a new false teaching. I say new in the sense that not as old as hundreds of years, but this movement really began maybe just a few decades ago about how the fact that all my life is worship. So I don't need to go to worship on Sunday because all my entire life is worship. And yet you try to ask them the question thinking that, okay, well, when you go to the bathroom, are you worshiping? What about when you're in the shower, bathing, are you worshiping?
It also tells us not to forsake the assembly.
It does also say not to forsake the assembly. But these are excuses that people try to make in order to not go or not feel required to go on Sunday mornings. They'll say, well, all my life is worship. Well, Brother Sid brings a good point right here. Verse 5.
We don't just go to worship, though. We go to encourage each other.
Absolutely. Hebrews, yes, chapter 10, verse 24 and 25. I agree with y'all. But yet, again, these are people today that try to make those kind of excuses. And it's sad. It's the fact that they just don't want to be told what to do.
And they also say, I'm as good as you are.
Yep, I'm as good as you are. Yep, exactly.
Every one of us bring light to something in there that some of the rest of us didn't see.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We learn from one another. This is why I love Bible class. Is because this is the opportunity where we all like to bring into discussion, and that's what I love. I love interactions. Believe it or not, people have asked me, well, what do you prefer more? Do you prefer giving the sermon or giving the class lesson? I say I prefer giving the class lesson. I really do, because it involves interaction. I learn a lot from y'all more than I learn from myself. I mean, y'all teach me a lot.
All the time that we've been out from the coronavirus deal and Joel's illness and all, I made unleavened bread, we had communion, we worship, but it's nothing like being here, communing with the saints,
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's not the same.
participating, all together.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what they did in the New Testament, is that they actually met daily. They met together daily in one another's homes. A lot of people they misinterpret that, thinking that, they met in homes, so this family met in their own home, other family met in their home. No, that's not what the text says. The text says that they all met in one another's homes on a daily basis. They met in this family's home together on one day. The next day they met in this family's home together. They were always together as one. They're never separated or divided into different little parts of the map. The congregation of that town always met together either in the temple, synagogue, or in someone's home. They were always together. And on the first day of the week especially, and also even through the remainder of the week, they always met daily. And so it is, I agree. I mean, being stuck in this whole quarantine thing, it's not the same. Wednesday nights, I can't wait until we get back together on Wednesday nights. Why? Because it's Bible class and I like interactions. I love to listen more than I actually do, talking. And I love listening to people's thoughts. I love listening to people's answers. I mean, it makes me feel good when I see that the congregation's participating, they're answering the questions correctly. That helps me know that they are learning and they're growing. And it does. It encourages me. And being stuck in my office at home on Wednesday nights, having to just basically make it a lecture. It kind of gets a little bit tiring at times, but I can't wait till, we're back together Sunday night and Wednesday night. But looking at the bright side of things, I'm very blessed and thankful that we're all here this morning together. But now, not getting sidetracked, take a little shotgun, kill that rabbit, chasing a rabbit. But yes, what we see here in verse 5 is that the boy and I will go over there and worship and come again to you. So a great lesson that, yes, worship is actually a state of mind that we are in. A state of spirit and mind that we are in. Worship is not a life thing. You know, you're not worshiping God when you're using the bathroom. That just sounds a little bit odd and unusual. But from the principle that we have here, and also through the examples of the New Testament, worship has always been a state of mind and spirit that we put ourselves in when we come together to worship God. So I think it's a great lesson.
In everyday life, the word worship is misused, maybe.
Yes.
It's more, in our everyday life, it's more of our attitude, our way we treat people,
Mm-hmm.
way we supposed to treat people.
Yes.
Do we teach? Do we take care of opportunities that we have in our everyday lives? It's more the attitude or frame of mind we get, which you just didn't say it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what you were saying.
Yes, sir.
Worship is the frame of mind you
Yes. Mm-hmm.
get anywhere, maybe even the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You know, it's the frame of mind you have that, you know, you put God first on everything.
Yes.
And when we leave this building, we don't always put God first. I'm guilty.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know, we be inside this building, I'm probably one of the best Christians around. When I get outside, I may not be.
I see the point, yes, that you're bringing up. And this is actually a misunderstanding of Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. Where people say that this is your, offer yourselves as living sacrifices, for this is your spiritual service. Other versions may say spiritual worship. Well, translation there of the Greek word, spiritual service, is more of the accurate translation of it. And so, yes, I mean, our service that we are doing outside in the world, making sure that our minds are being transformed, that we are showing the likeness of Christ to others, either through acts of kindness, either through acts of good works. Yes, that is our spiritual service. Can that be a form of worship? Yeah, Paul says spiritually speaking, it's a spiritual service. But now when it comes to the worship assembly, yes, worship assembly, frame of mind, frame of heart, state of mind, frame of spirit, state of spirit that we're in. And so I don't want to kind of get us, off back on that rabbit again. Not dead yet.
It also says living sacrifice.
Yes.
We
Yes.
live every day in service.
Yes. Absolutely. Everyday service. Mm-hmm.
We should never be out of service to the Lord.
Correct.
We're all ministers.
That's right.
You know, to call you our minister wouldn't be wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but I could call each one here a minister.
Mm-hmm.
They should be. We
Yeah.
should.
Absolutely.
You're the evangelist.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Jesus clears everything up in John chapter 4.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
23 to
he says
24.
that y'all say to go worship in the mountain. He's talking to the woman.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, young people that worship him, let's worship him in spirit and in truth.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say where,
That's right. Mm-hmm.
but we got to worship in spirit and truth.
Yes.
You know, if this building was burned down, we wouldn't have a church building.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So we could go somewhere else
Yes. Absolutely.
as long as we assemble.
As long as we assemble together.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think
Correct.
our everyday life is our kind of work.
Yes.
That's more obedient. to
Yes.
work.
That's right. Being
And
doers
then
of
we
the
gather
word.
in worship to thank God for letting us do that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we have this nice building here for our convenience, but Brother Sid makes a great point. I mean, if it does burn down, it's not the end of it.
No.
I mean, recently during the riots, the violence that's been going on in Little Rock, one of our congregations, they got set on fire and burned down. You think that stopped them from worshiping? No. Mm-mm. As far as what I've been informed and researching and everything, the brethren there had told me saying that, yeah, they've been meeting other places, someone, they met in family's home at one time, they met together in a park somewhere and worshiped. So I think this building's for our convenience, but if something happens to it, no, we can still worship somewhere else together. It's not going to be the end of it. Oh, well, the building's burned down, I'm going to wait till they rebuild this, I'm just going to stay home.
That's not the church.
That's right. There you go. The building is not the church. We are the church. The building is just a building. We make up the body of Christ. We make up the church.
I'm so glad you got air conditioning.
What's that?
The Lord tells us in Hebrews 10:25 not to forsake the assembly.
Yep.
That's not just when you're sick, go anyhow.
Hmm.
That means don't quit serving the Lord. Don't quit.
Exactly.
But nowhere in God's word does it tell us, or say any place in there that says that we can override what God says and not sin.
Hmm.
There's no word that says we can dismiss services because somebody's got the flu.
Exactly. Hmm. Nowhere it says that.
Those people in the first century met in fear of their lives,
Yeah.
but they still sinned.
That's right. They still assembled. And you can imagine just, Peter talks about that in his letter, 1 Peter. Because they were fearing the fact that, okay, our lives are in danger. Can I trust this brother and sister who has decided to open his or their home for worship service? Can I trust this family? Can I trust my life in their hands? Because what if I go there Sunday morning and all of a sudden the Roman soldiers show up and they betray us? They turn us in. So you see, a lot of internal conflicts begin to happen at that time. And we think that we have it bad. It's not as bad as they had it.
Yes, but if we have a faith, a true faith, it won't matter.
Exactly.
We don't have to worry about who we're with or where we go.
Exactly.
God's there.
Exactly. And see, this is what makes Abraham's faith such a strong and great example, is that he didn't let anything stop him from serving God and obeying his commands.
Because he knew God would take care of whatever comes.
Exactly. He knew the Lord would provide,
Yes.
and that he knew that God would take care of him and his family. And so Abraham's faith can just be tremendous lessons that we can learn, generally speaking, when it comes to our faith and trust that we have in the Lord. When it comes to our worshiping him, when it comes to where we worship him, when it comes to whatever it is that we can think of. His example of faith is such a great influence for my faith and your faith and all of our faiths together.
Isaac had faith in his father, and Abraham had faith in his father.
What's that?
That Isaac had faith in his father when he told him God would provide, and Abraham had faith in his father.
That's right, that God will provide. Mm-hmm. Find it interesting. They had faith in their father because they had faith in the Heavenly Father. I like to word it like that. It's a great example, Sister Linda, a great lesson. Is that we have faith in our Father because we see their faith in the Heavenly Father. I think this is a great lesson for the influence that fathers and grandfathers have towards their children and grandchildren. I know at times it can be very difficult when it comes to our children leaving the faith and seeing that your grandchildren are growing up in a home where God is not the foundation of it. I have nieces and nephews that are in homes where God is not the foundation of it. And I've always told my brothers and everything that if I were to watch them, babysit them, you'd know that I'd be taking them to worship service on Sundays. I will. I'm more than willing to always watch them. But just so you know, if I'm going to watch and babysit them, they are coming with me and my wife to worship services on Sunday.
Did he reject that?
What's that?
Did he reject that?
Well, it hasn't come to that point yet because they live in Florida.
Oh.
And other in-laws, that live over in Arizona. But a few other lessons that we learn from Genesis chapter 22.
Really understand how Jesus
stayed in God's seat, you might say, or in, because all of these people, like, Abraham's son, he's already chosen
Correct.
to be a prophet or a teacher or a leader or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Isaac is the chosen seed, which makes him a very unique son. That's why he was Abraham's only unique son, the son whom he loved.
Right.
That is why Jesus in John 3:16 is referred to as the only unique Son of God, because he is the fulfillment of that promise. Isaac was the promised seed. Jesus was the fulfillment of that promised seed.
Jesus was also betrayed, and knew he was going to be betrayed.
Yes.
He
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he knew that he was going to be.
faith in his father that was done.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, what do you think made Jesus submit to the Father's will? Prayed 3 times in the Garden of Gethsemane. If there's any other way, please let it be. Let this cup pass from me. But 3 times the answer was no. Jesus already knew what had to be done, but still we see the humanity side of him in the garden where he says, I know it has to be done, but if you're willing to change your mind at the last minute, it can be done any other way, I'm fine with that too. But still, he submitted to the Father's will. Not my will, but yours be done. I want your will to be done. What do you think gave him that courage or that motivation to be able to submit to that will? Faith and trust. Faith and trust. In the end, Jesus already knew what the outcome was going to be. He knew that everything was going to be fine, that he was going to raise on the 3rd day, that he was going to raise Sunday morning. But still, he just didn't want to go through the pain. My mother always told me when she was in labor with me, my grandmother, they rushed my mom to the hospital, and my mom wanted her mom to be by her side, but she said that she can't. She knew that everything was going to be fine, that she was going to give birth to a healthy, turned out to be a good, handsome boy. She knew that everything was going to be fine, but she said that she couldn't go back there because she just can't see my mom in much pain. But she knew everything was going to be fine, but she just didn't want to see my mom to be in pain. I think it's the same way that we, in a way, as far as speaking of when we look at the submissiveness of Jesus Christ and his faith and trust in God. He knew everything was going to be fine in the end, but he just kind of didn't want to go through the pain, which is understandable. I wouldn't want to be crucified. I mean, if you really do your research and background and to see the torment, the torture of the crucifixion process, it is brutal. It is brutal and it's cruel. One doctor had even stated saying that he was surprised that Jesus wasn't even in a state of shock after he received the flogging. He said the flogging was the Roman flogging that they did with broken shards of glass and bones at the end of each rope. He said it tears your skin to the deepest part. And he said that he is amazed that after that tormented process, how Jesus was not in a state of shock.
Plus having to carry that cross.
Plus having to carry that cross as well. It even stated when they were making the movie Passion of the Christ, Jim Caviezel, the guy that played Jesus, during the flogging scene, part of that shard actually got on his real skin and teared about, I think he said, maybe about 3 inches of his skin off. He blacked out. He blacked out in the scene from just 3 inches of his own skin being ripped off. Imagine Jesus receiving that. All the broken shards and bones on his bare skin being ripped right off. Surprised he didn't black out.
He also refused anything to kill the man.
Yep. Yes.
So that he wouldn't, he'd know what he was doing.
Yes.
He did get down because he couldn't carry his cross.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
he
I
did
think
need
he
help
got somebody
carrying it.
else to
Yes,
do it.
absolutely. Absolutely. He did get some help, having to carry that cross up to Mount Golgotha. But folks, I mean, we look at that and
What's that song, Jesus paid it all?
yes,
Left the crimson stains.
absolutely. He paid it all. He paid a debt that he did not owe. I owed a debt I could not pay. But Jesus paid it all for me. Folks, it's when we really dig deep into the text and kind of look at what it is that Jesus went through, how he is truly the fulfillment of the seed of Isaac, of Abraham, the fulfillment of the promise of the chosen seed. I mean, it makes us appreciate what he did even more. It makes us show his faithfulness. The Hebrew writer even says, chapter 12, verse 1 and following, he endured the cross. He endured the cross. And with the cross came flogging. It came hours upon hours of torture. Him having to lift himself up while on the cross in order to breathe. Imagine all the blood that was filling up, maybe even in his lungs, because of all the beating that he took from that flogging. It was a painful, cruel process. And Jesus did it for us.
Because he had a nail in his hand, right through the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So he hung
right
it
through the
by
middle.
palm of his hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it was a brutal process, and yet Jesus, his faith that he shows us, he endured it all. Abraham's faith that he shows us in having to obey a command, or what I say, a father's worst nightmare of having to sacrifice your son. His faith was strong and powerful, and again, it makes us reflect deeply on our faith. How strong is our faith? When the angel came and intervened, it says that verse 12, he said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God." It is the fear of God that makes a man obey God. It is the fear that Solomon talks about in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13 and 14. It is the fear that is the whole duty of man, universally speaking. The whole conclusion of mankind and his purpose in life is to fear God and keep his commandments. Well, we see an illustration right here through the life of Abraham. He feared God and he kept his commandments.
I think in the beginning, whenever you first start being a Christian, you fear God really bad. You're just really scared of him.
Oh, yeah.
And I think over a period of time, after you learn more about him and realize that he's on your side and helps you out, then you start loving him.
Absolutely. She's learning what we have talked about in regards to the fear. The more you grow as a Christian, and the more you understand that God is on your side, the more you understand that what God does for you in life. John says that fear has been transformed into perfect love. Perfect love casts out fear. It's the example of a child. A child obeys his parents or grandparents because of fear of what? Spanking! But hopefully through godly parenting and through providing them direction into the ways and the path of God, they will grow up and then they will still obey what you have to say. Why? Not because of spanking, but because of love. It's the same thing with my dad. I still obey my dad today. Why? Because I know if I don't, I'm going to hurt his feelings. I do it because I love him now. I'm not scared of, spanking. I'm a big grown man. And if he's watching this, I mean, he thinks he can take me down? Come on. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
God, we have fear of what will come in the future.
Absolutely. There will always still be that fear of what will come in the future if you don't obey him.
But
So,
because your fear is not, the fear of God is not being afraid of him.
mhm,
It's, I don't know what it is, but it's
Respect
not.
and love.
Respect.
mhm,
Yeah,
yep, absolutely. Mhm,
because you know, if you don't do what he says, you're going to get punished.
absolutely. And that punishment is eternal punishment. And so, yeah, so there is that fear of respect. There is that fear that we have to know that if we don't obey God and keep his commandments, then, yeah, I mean, we receive the consequences of eternal hell. And people should be scared of hell. I mean, I refer to myself as, a mature, Christian who's always still learning new things each and every day. But I still have that frightful scare of, hell. I don't want to be thrown there.
I think about that every time we're out burning limbs and stuff,
Mhm.
get close to that fire.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, boy. Oh, yeah. Mhm. And
That's
here,
like that right there.
oh, absolutely. And that's just, physical, fire or temporary fire. But imagine a fire that's never quenched, that's never put out. It's a scary thought, folks. Very scary thought.
Verse 1, he starts out knowing what Abraham's gonna do.
Mhm.
He says he tempts him, which means he tested
Yes.
Abraham.
Yes.
So Abraham would know what he was gonna do.
Oh, yes.
He
Absolutely.
didn't do it, God didn't do it because he didn't know. He done it so Abraham.
Would know. Absolutely. He already knew what the outcome was. God already knew what the outcome would be. Which is why it is, according to context, I believe King James may say tempt, but better translation of the word is test. Is test. Because James tells us that God doesn't tempt anybody. So God already knew the outcome. And so why would he even think about tempting Abraham? No, it doesn't make sense. No, he tested Abraham so Abraham would know. And I believe even still today, God tests us at times, does he not? Absolutely. He can test us in many ways. In many, many ways. Well, our time is getting to us, and man, that 20 and that 30 minutes just goes by like that.
Well, in King James, in the verse 1, it says, God did tempt Abraham. But then over in 7, it said, be glad.
Mhm. Yes. And from the context of it, the Hebrew word tempt, in the context of it is literally supposed to be translated as test. So that was a form of test that he had tried. And it was a test that he gave so that Abraham would know. God already knew that Abraham was going to remain faithful. But this benefit of this test was so that Abraham would know. So good thoughts.
So Abraham, but Abraham trusted in God to provide,
Yes.
just like he told his son Isaac. God
Yes.
will provide.
God will provide. And the Hebrew writer again, it goes back to Hebrews 11 where he says that Abraham, he had faith in God, that he knew that he would have the power to raise his son from the dead. In which, figuratively speaking, he did. Good thoughts on Genesis 22. And this is the reason why I wanted to make it a 2-part lesson, because I wanted us to have a little bit more talk about it, a little bit more talk about Jesus' side of things, of how Jesus' sacrifice is in fact the fulfillment of Isaac's sacrifice, and seeing just the similarities between the two, and also looking at the strong, great example of Abraham's faith and Jesus' faith at the cross, how he endured the cross and the cruel punishments behind it. And I believe there is great lessons and a great example for us when it comes to our faith that we have in God. Any other closing remarks or thoughts on Genesis 22? All right, brothers and
Why do you
sisters.
think he bound by it?
Because that was part of the sacrifice process, is that you laid the altar out, and this was during the patriarchal age. That's a good question. It was during the patriarchal age, and it was you set up the altar the way that God had instructed it to be set up, and then they would bind the animal sacrifice on there. So it was part of the process. Yeah, and just like Jesus was bound on that cross. Yeah, and I think it's another great similarity as well. Well, good question.
When Abraham said God will provide, at that point, Isaac was what was being provided
Mhm.
until he took that knife up and obeyed what God had said, and the angel stopped it. Then he provided the
Mm-hmm.
ram and the camel.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Now, another thing, and I'll go ahead and just end it on this note. Here's what's very interesting: is that the place there was called what? The Lord will provide, right? Well, he named it after God had already provided that animal that they found. So, and I look at the Hebrew text, it was in the future tense right there. Did God make the fulfillment provision in regards to the sacrifice? Yes, he did. And who was it? Jesus the Christ. So yes, the Lord will provide, and the Lord did provide. He provided us the great and ultimate sacrifice, and that was his Son, Jesus Christ. Thank y'all so much for your attention, brothers and sisters. A great discussion, great questions and comments and thoughts. I mean, just a wonderful study from Genesis 22, and I look forward to next Sunday where we will pick up on Genesis 23. Thank y'all so much.
While you're up there,